Hey everybody, this is Marcus Stewart, and welcome to Call It in the Ring, a wrestling recap and discussion show. We're talking about Smackdown Live, the September 18th show of 2018, our final bit of fallout from the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view this past weekend. But first, as always, you can download and subscribe to this show on YouTube, iTunes, and Podbean. Just search for Marcus Writes About Games, and be sure to sign up. Helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Anyways, we are open up with Miz TV. The show is taking place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, by the way. And Miz talks about how he's got a big news that he wants to announce. And he shows us a graphic of it's going to be Miz taking on Daniel Bryan at the Super Showdown in Australia. And the winner will earn a WWE Championship match at some point in the future. Not sure when, but that's a heck of a prize. And honestly, I could go either way with that. Either Miz or Bryan taking on AJ would be pretty sweet. But yeah, he announces that. And then he has a special guest, a mystery guest. He says that he had to move heaven and earth to make this guest arrive, but it was worth it. And the special guest is Maryse. His wife Maryse shows up. His special guest is Maryse. Maryse makes her way down to the ring. And they, kind of have a sarcastic bit back and forth, like, oh my god, I can't believe you made it. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm here. That kind of stuff. And they talk about how great it was to beat Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella at Hell in a Cell. Maryse starts ripping on Brie, saying that she was always the better athlete, which really probably isn't that far, far out of the equation, to be frank, because Brie isn't that great in the ring. But she said beating Brie was the easiest thing ever, and that she only married Bryan to further her career. And then Miz kind of reiterates what he said last week about how their marriage is a marriage of convenience. I mean, by that I mean Bryan and Brie's marriage, saying that they've just married each other to benefit for themselves. And he decides that the crowd is booing this, and he's like yelling at the crowd, saying like, "You're gonna boo my wife? You're gonna boo a mother?" And he's like, you know what? I'm going to treat you guys like children. So I'm going to bring out your hero so I can beat him up some more. So he calls out Daniel Bryan, surprisingly. And I was expecting like a either not Daniel Bryan or like a midget or something to come out. So, Miz calling out Bryan is a bit out of character for him. But Bryan, the actual Bryan, shows up. And Bryan says, you can talk about me all you want, but when you start talking about my wife, this is what happens. And he storms the ring and starts him and Miz get into a fight, and Maryse is standing in the corner during all this, and eventually Miz kind of positions himself in front of Maryse, and Bryan hits his running drop kick, which sends him into Maryse, and she goes down. And Miz is concerned, and Bryan is concerned and remorseful, looking like, oh, what have I done? And the doctors come out, and Maryse is just like clutching her stomach. And the entire time it's just kind of like this long, kind of quiet like moment with Bryan's got his hand on his mouth, and he eventually Miz goes to get water, and then Bryan is apologizing to Maryse, and then Miz comes back in. He's standing behind him, and he's standing there for a good while. We wait for this, and then eventually the doctors get Maryse to the ring apron, and she stands up, and all of a sudden she smiles like this evil smile, and then Bryan realizes that the jig is up. And Miz tries to hit a skull-crushing finale, but Bryan is able to elbow his way out of it. And then eventually he sends Miz into Maryse, sending her tumbling to the floor. And then he clotheslines Miz out of the ring, and Bryan stands tall. So, interesting, like a totally fine, interesting segment. It's interesting that they're doing this number one contenders match. I almost feel like, if you're going to do that, why not have Bryan and Brie win? So that at least the feud is kind of like 1-1. I mean, Bryan didn't get pinned. Miz only beat him by cheating. But I don't know, just to kind of even up. Because it's kind of the question of like, so what did Bryan really do to get a number one contenders match? He's technically lost his last two big matches. But, this WWE logic, which oftentimes is non-existent. But regardless, I'm looking forward to the match, and that's at least a nice little incentive for the feud. Back from break, and Brian is being interviewed, and he says that he knew something was up. Kind of like what I just said. It's like the moment that Miz called him out, he's like, that's weird. There must be some foul play, mischief is afoot here. So that's how he knew that Miz was going to try to pull some trick out of his sleeve. But that's not going to matter, because in Australia, he's going to punch Miz in the face and punch his ticket to the WWE Championship. We get our first match of the night. We got Cesaro taking on Kofi Kingston. And this is kind of building towards the Smackdown Tag Team title match between The Bar and the New Day in Australia. The New Day come out dressed as kind of like the Crocodile Hunter, like Steve Irwin. I feel like I almost want to say, like, do you guys remember the Crocodile Hunter? But that makes me feel old. And it's like, man, has enough time passed where I actually have to ask if people remember Steve Irwin? It's been dead for 12 years. Holy crap, man, that's a long time. I'm sorry, having a weird tangent now. But yeah, to come out as Steve Irwin, or at least it was maybe Steve Irwin inspired. And they cut a promo saying that they're just getting ready for their match. And Big E does a horrendous Australian accent that Kofi and Xavier call him out for, saying that not only was that bad, but that might have been a little bit offensive. But then Big E gets in a good line saying that it's okay. I talked to the Iconics backstage and they said it was okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. As long as they approve it, then it's acceptable. The Bar says that the New Day are jokes and that they're going to win the titles and elevate the belts back, which, man, the Bar have really fallen through the floor since coming to SmackDown, haven't they? It's crazy because when they were on Raw, they were the premier team. And, maybe there were times that they were featured a bit too much, but my God, it's been like night and day seeing the Bar on Raw, winning titles left and right and just being super dominant, and then coming to SmackDown and barely, like, I have to remember that they're on SmackDown, because if they're either not wrestling at all and being gone for long stretches, or they come back and they're just not really doing much. They're not really in the title picture as much as you would expect. So it's been a weird year for the Bar. Maybe they should break them up. I mean, couldn't hurt. I think the SmackDown tag scene is a bit stronger in terms of legit teams. So, I mean, I kind of said before that the SmackDown's kind of missing a mid-card. And, I mean, both guys are kind of above, like, upper mid-card at minimum. But, Cesaro challenging Shinsuke for the U.S. title, or Sheamus kind of giving AJ a new challenger for the WWE Championship. They might be better suited for them right now, if they're not going to use them as a team. But we have a pretty solid match, as you would expect, between Cesaro and Kofi, who are two guys that I hope to see compete for the WWE Championship at some point in the future. This match is a little bit shorter than I would have liked. It ends with Cesaro catching Kofi with the neutralizer and hitting the pin. But it was, totally solid while it lasted, as is, you would expect from these two. Backstage, Aiden English finds Rusev and Lana, and he apologizes for not winning the tag titles at Hell in a Cell. Rusev, of course, is getting ready because he's going to challenge Shinsuke Nakamura for the U.S. title that night. And he says, hey, we're cool, basically, but also don't come out to the ring. And Aiden's like, oh, man, really? Come on. And Rusev's like, he kind of says, puts his foot down, says, stay back here. And him and Lana go to leave. And then Aiden turns around and starts venting about, like, how basically that Rusev doesn't appreciate him and that he's the reason that Rusev Day is so big. And by he, I mean Aiden himself. He kind of takes the credit for Rusev Day becoming as popular as it is, and saying that Rusev doesn't know what he's talking about and he needs him. And he's saying all this to, like, one of the random production people, and the production guy's looking like, what's happening? How did I get involved? And Aiden's going on and on and on, saying all this stuff. And he also brings up Lana, saying that maybe if Lana acted more like a manager instead of a wife, Rusev would be doing better, and just kind of starts ripping on her. And then the production guy is kind of pointing behind Aiden, kind of trying to get attention, like, hey. And then Aiden turns around, and of course, it's Lana, who heard all of that, and she's looking pretty PO'd. And Aiden immediately kind of tries to backpedal and is apologizing. And Lana says, I'm going to tell Rusev. And Aiden is chasing after her, like, no, don't tell Rusev. So we got a kind of a tattletale storyline going on here. But it's an interesting wrinkle. It seems like we've kind of been waiting for this to happen for a little bit now. So it's like it's finally happening. By that I mean Rusev Day splitting because of Aiden English. But I like that. I like the idea that instead of just having him turn heel like as a surprise, I like that they kind of had him basically like say what he really feels out loud. So we know that he thinks he's basically a bad guy, more or less, kind of saying that he thinks he's the reason that the team is so popular and all that stuff. Like, I like that they let us inside his head like that, and that everyone is in on what Aiden's true intentions are, except for Rusev. I think that's it's different. I think it's pretty fun. Because, you do the surprise heel turns all the time, and we just did it with, like, Becky Lynch. So I like this, that they've kind of, like, done it, but it hasn't happened because Rusev is not privy to it yet. So now it's kind of like a ticking time bomb. Like, okay, so when's Rusev going to find out? Because now we all know, and so does Lana. So I thought this was cool. Another cool thing that happened was the commentators are starting to talk about something, and then they get like an update in their little headsets, and they're like, oh, wait, something's going on in the production area, like in the production truck. Something involving Randy Orton. Let's cut over there. And we cut to the inside of the production truck, and we see Randy has basically taken one of the production guys hostage, more or less, and is forcing him to find and play footage of all the times that he's attacked Jeff Hardy. Like, there's all these multiple monitors with just different scenes of the things he's done. And he is, like, physically kind of threatening him. Like, he's kind of holding his shoulder and, like, very kind of, like, tensely squeezing it and telling him to hurry up and to find the clip. And the guy's, like, super nervous. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Orton. I'm trying as hard as I can. And then he's like, you're hurting me, Randy. And then Randy's like, oh, I'm hurting you? And he's like, is this better? And then he, like, grabs his face. And then the guy's like, yes, this is better, Mr. Orton. And the clip that Randy wanted to find was the infamous screwdriver in the ear clip from their his Hell in a Cell match with Jeff. And he's, like, asking the production guy, how does it make him feel when he sees that? And, like, it makes you squirm, doesn't it? And just being a total nut job. And I thought this was really cool because, again, I like when they do things that are different with their promos. Like, okay, yeah, like, have Randy, that's creative, let him, like, something that just hasn't been done. Like, you see so much of the same style of promos that I like that they are, when they mix stuff up like this. And also it reinforces Randy's character as a total crazy guy at the same time. So well done all around. And what's cool about this is that Randy says that, if you think this was bad, wait till you see what I do to my next target. So it's like, okay, here we go. He's setting up his next victim. I like that, he promised from the beginning that he was going after multiple people. So I like that they're, they don't just have him beat Jeff and then kind of just drop that. Like, but have him actually go after more than one person. And I still maintain that Daniel Bryan would be the perfect next target. And I want to say maybe he'll cost Bryan the Super Showdown match, but he could attack him before that. I mean, he kind of interrupted the Shinsuke Jeff feud by attacking Jeff, so he could do the same with Miz. But yeah, AJ is still kind of tied up. So, I mean, if he's kind of working his way up the ladder and then eventually getting to AJ, provided that AJ is still champion by the time he gets there, Daniel would be the next logical step in terms of the big fan favorites on SmackDown. So, well done. AJ Styles is being interviewed, and the lady, for some reason that's interviewing him, doesn't straight up ask him what he thinks about, like, the fact that he tapped out to Samoa Joe while he was pinning him in the submission, and kind of the controversial ending is he just says kind of like, oh, you defended the title, what's next or whatever. Like, why don't you ask him, like, hey, how do you feel about the tap? But AJ kind of sort of answers the question anyway, at least, or addresses it, saying that, hey, maybe Samoa Joe was screwed. That might very well be a possibility. But in his mind, it's karma for all the crap that Joe's been doing, which I actually really like that answer of like, he's not denying it and he's not trying to, he's not owning up to it, like saying like, oh yeah, I tapped. Like, he's not straight up saying that, but he's also, because he hates Joe to death, he's not kind of gonna give him the satisfaction of admitting it. He's just straight up says like, hey, karma, that's what you get, asshole. So I kind of like that AJ is kind of keeping in, letting it, going more by hatred than maybe pure, like, in the face of the evidence, being sportsman about it. So like, no, screw you, too bad. that's what happens. So, and he's facing Andrade Cien Almas again tonight, so he's like saying, I gotta be ready for Almas because he's a dangerous cat. Lana catches up to Rusev, which I guess it took Lana this long to find her husband, considering that she was right behind him when they left, but she only now finally catches up to him as he's just about to make his entrance, and she's, again, like the little kid that's going to tell on the teacher. It's like, Rusev, I got something to tell you. And then Aiden's like right behind her, like, no. Like trying to stop her. But Rusev is so focused on his match that he doesn't want to hear it. He's like, not now, Lana, not now. And then he asks Aiden if he would like to do the honors. And it's like, didn't you just tell Aiden to like stay in the back? But now that he's here, you want him to introduce you and be out there? So it's like, did he have like a change of heart during his 5-mile trek to the gorilla position? It was weird, and even Aiden's like, oh really? Yes, absolutely. He kind of gives Lana a look, and Lana is not looking happy. But again, that weird logic aside, I like that we all know, and Rusev doesn't know. It's fun when the audience is in, and the character herself isn't. Shinsuke makes his entrance. Aiden does his whole spiel. Lana comes out with him, and just the tension between the two, because they both want to tell Rusev, but now that he's in his match, they don't want to distract him. And Rusev and Nakamura was a match that I've been saying for a while would be a really great U.S. title feud, and just a good matchup in general. It's like, I like that pairing, and they kind of proved me right, because the match that they had was quite good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Rusev is he's over, he's popular, he's someone the crowd just wants to get behind, and his style meshes well with Shinsuke. They both have pretty hard hitting physical styles. Aiden at certain points would grab the mic and start a Rusev Day chant. So just being really over the top here with his support, possibly to try to curry favor from Rusev, and Lana the whole time is looking just so sick of him and his antics. And Rusev's a little distracted, but he also has to stay on Shinsuke. But eventually, Aiden's distractions prove to be a bit too much, because he gets on the apron as Rusev has Nakamura where he wants him. I forgot at one point he hit a really sick Machka kick on Shinsuke that looked fantastic. But he's got Shinsuke right where he wants him. He's kind of setting up to finish him off. And Aiden gets on the apron and he does the Rusev crush thing, but on the microphone. So he straight up steals Lana's bit. And Rusev's like, what the hell are you doing? And he's turned around, and Shinsuke slithers in and rolls up Rusev for the 1-2-3, retaining the United States Championship. Rusev is in disbelief, as is Lana and Aiden. And, it's like, Aiden, you got some splaining to do. But Aiden gets in the ring to apologize. And then he turns on Rusev. He attacks him and hits him with the microphone in the head, sends him down, and then just keeps hitting him in the head repeatedly with that mic. And the whole time, Lana's in the corner and just screaming at like Aiden to stop. And Aiden is being all vicious, just beating the crap out of Rusev. And Aiden goes to leave, and the whole time we hear Lana screaming at him to get out. She's almost like Stephanie McMahon like in her shrieks. Like, she's like, get out! Get out! And Aiden is just looking remorseless. And yeah, this was a really good beatdown. The only problem is I have a hard time buying Aiden English as any real threat to Rusev face to face. So, because he's never been a credible singles guy. So they've got he's got his work cut out for him on that end. Unless he plays like the kind of heel that's just going to keep ducking Rusev, and so like Rusev, you want to see Rusev get his hands on him, but Aiden keeps finding ways to escape him until finally they find a way to where Rusev can corner him and beat the snot out of him. But for now, it just he got over on Rusev using a weapon in the microphone, but face to face when the one-on-one match comes down, it's hard to not picture Rusev just steamrolling over him, because at the end of the day, it's Aiden English. I mean, come on. But really good heel turn here, good beatdown. Next up, we've got AJ Styles, WWE Champion AJ Styles, taking on Andrade Cien Almas, accompanied by his business associate Zelina Vega. This is a rematch from their really good first encounter from a couple months ago, or however long it was, which ended, AJ got the win, but almost took AJ to the limit. And kind of the story going in was that Andrade and Zelina were saying that they learned their lesson and that they've made the adjustments. And those adjustments were, as soon as AJ hit the ring, he's still doing his pose. And as he's turned to the crowd to pose, Andrade just jumps him and starts beating the crap out of AJ immediately before the bell can ring. He's like stomping on him, just like a rabid dog, just all over AJ. So AJ is already in a disadvantage, and he's all out of sorts. Eventually, he says that he can compete, and then as soon as the bell rings, Andrade again just jumps all over him and is beating him up. AJ is able to finally kind of start the fight back and defend himself, but a lot of this match was Andrade. He got a lot of offense here. He was kind of dominating, which makes sense because he had the advantage from the get-go. AJ didn't even get a chance to take his shirt off for like 3/4 of the match, and this was another really good showing from these two. I mean, these are two of the best pure kind of workers, I guess, on the roster, and like I said, in their first match, they mesh well together, and this Andrade showed great intensity, especially with Zelina, doing her screaming and telling her to hurt him more and all that stuff on the outside. They're just such a good pairing, and I would love to see a full-on feud between these two for the title. But this was a great hard-hitting match. This was more focused on brutality and kind of AJ trying to survive than just unlike the first match, which was just a random match. That it was more about like in-ring work and both of them trying to outdo the other in terms of like their athleticism and their high-flying abilities. It was they were still doing some of that stuff, but this was more like AJ fighting from underneath and just trying to and Andrade being more vicious than anything because he wants to prove that he can beat AJ. But unfortunately, even though he gets really close and he more than holds his own here, AJ picks up the win after hitting a very slick and really cool counter where Andrade goes for his hammerlock DDT, and then AJ counters it by scooping him down and turning it into a jackknife cover. But before the count of two, AJ turns the jackknife into the Styles Clash like seamlessly. So he wasn't really trying to pin him. It was almost like he faked out Andrade like, oh, I'm going for pin. Actually, no, Styles Clash. Bam. And you kind of have to look it up to see, but I didn't expect it, and it looked really smooth and slick, and I loved it. So he does that, hits the Styles Clash, gets the pin. Cool match. AJ's, celebrating, and then a Samoa Joe emerges from the crowd almost immediately and jumps AJ and is beating him up in the ring, and he throws him outside, and he's yelling at AJ that he knows the truth, and by that he knows that he's like, the truth about like I should be the champion, and saying that AJ will never be safe, and he tries to throw AJ into the stairs, but AJ counters and fights back and sends Joe into the stairs, and AJ starts bringing on the offense. And Joe eventually rakes the eyes and escapes through the crowd, still yelling that this is kind of like only the beginning and that AJ will not be safe going forward. And, these two are, they're going to face each other at Australia in a winner. There must be a winner. It's kind of match because there's no disqualification, no count outs, all that good stuff. Good opening segment, or not good opening segment, but good segment here in general. And I'm wondering how they go further with this this controversy, if they keep addressing it, or if this was the only time they're gonna make it a thing and just have Joe be a psychopath alongside Randy Orton. What I was thinking about recently, to go on a weird aside, is how cool would it be if WWE did a new 2-man power trip with Randy Orton and Samoa Joe? And if you don't know what I'm referring to, history lesson time, the 2-man power trip was the team of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H back in 2001. This was after Stone Cold famously turned heel at the end of WrestleMania 17 by joining forces with his arch nemesis Vince McMahon, and he became a huge bad guy. And then to kind of further solidify his heel turn, he joined forces with Triple H, one of his most hated rivals, and they became the 2-man power trip, and they were like this dominant team because, it's Stone Cold and Triple H, like, that's an unstoppable force. And they won, Steve was the WWE champion, and then Triple H won the Intercontinental Championship. And then they won the tag titles too. They were I think they had all the gold at one point. But they were a really cool team. The idea was just taking two super duper mega heels and putting them together. They were like the anti-mega powers. So seeing something like that with Joe and Orton, who were very similar, two sadistic bastards and two of the best heels in the company. That would be pretty cool. Imagine them hooking up. So I'm going to put that out there so that if it happens, you can all say that you heard it here first. Next up, we have Asuka taking on Billie Kay of the Iconics. This is a follow-up from last week when the Iconics beat up Naomi, and then Asuka made a return to save her. Naomi is accompanying Asuka here. They seem to be buddies now. Naomi even dances to Asuka's entrance. And of course, before the match, Iconics rip on Tulsa and make fun of Asuka and Naomi's dancing. Of course, it doesn't wind up doing anything to deter Asuka, because she beats Billie Kay in relatively short fashion with the Asuka lock. Not much to say there other than kind of getting Asuka back on track and reminding us of her dominance. Finally, our big final segment of the night is the championship coronation of Becky Lynch, the new SmackDown Women's Champion. Paige is in the ring to present the title to her. The title is under a blanket, even though we know what it looks like. And I know it's mainly because, she has her own customized side plates, but we know what those look like too because she's been champion before. But anyways, they do the whole big reveal and all that stuff. Becky is all cocky here and still getting cheered, as you would expect in this feud at this point. Still very much everyone's chanting "You deserve it" to her, and she says that that this is her show now, and that she's going to be on all the magazine covers and all the talk shows and stuff like that she was left off of before, and that she wants to call out Charlotte Flair. She was like, I only want one person out here, and I want Charlotte to face me now. Paige says there's not going to be a fight between the two. Charlotte comes out. Charlotte says that, no, I'm not here to fight. I'm going to show you the respect that you didn't show me at SummerSlam, and I'm going to congratulate you because you were the better woman. Of course, Becky is being all jerky about this, saying, well, I want you to, you can prove that by I want you to raise my hand. And then eventually she's like, okay, I'm just kidding, but put the title around my waist and making all these demands. And the whole time Charlotte is getting more and more angry. And Charlotte says that, I hope this moment was worth it because you threw away a hell of a lot more than a friendship to get this belt. And she announces that she will get her rematch for the title at the Super Showdown in Australia. And that, it took Becky 2 years to win the belt, but it's only going to take one night for her to lose it. Becky is still kind of being a jerk. She's like saying like, "Oh, I wasn't even listening to any of that. Like, I stopped listening after you said that I was the better woman." And she's like, "Okay, I don't want you to. I was just kidding. I don't want you to raise my hand. I don't want you to put the title around my waist, but I do want you to call me queen." And then Charlotte is looking more and more like she's gonna rip Becky's head off. And then Charlotte just turns around and goes to leave. And then Becky calls her a bitch for the second time. And then that's enough for Charlotte, who turns around and decks Becky. And they start fighting. They head to the outside, but Becky very quickly gets the upper hand, sends her into the stairs and then over the announce table. And then eventually throws her back in the ring and puts the disarm her on her. Just cranking on that arm. You would wonder why she wouldn't just break the arm, since it's not a match. She can kind of do whatever she wants, but she eventually lets it go. And the show ends with Becky standing tall. She beats up Charlotte again, and that takes us out. Again, the whole time everyone's cheering for Becky, even during this beatdown, and kind of booing Charlotte. But that's just life with this feud now. It seems. Becky still feels relatively awkward as a heel. And I don't know if it's so much her performance or the fact that I've said before that she's just one of those wrestlers that's just so naturally likable and like a natural villain that it's weird to see them try to be, or a natural babyface. I think I called her a natural villain. She's such a natural good guy that it's weird to see her try to be a villain. And she's getting a little bit more comfortable with each week, but it's still more awkward than anything. And the crowd supporting her this whole time isn't really helping. And I'm not sure what Becky would have to do, because I don't know. I don't necessarily think that being more violent is gonna make it better. I think that I don't know, like, I don't know if it's her not believing it herself enough or what have you, but there's just something still off about her as a heel. Like, I'm not convinced totally yet. Like, it still feels like she's acting like a heel instead of being a heel, if that makes sense. Like, she's pretending to be a villain, but isn't really feeling like an actual villain. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a problem. It's still kind of bothering me. It's a hitch in this story, so to speak. Even though the story itself has been pretty good for the most part. Like just the simple. Sometimes the best feuds in wrestling are the most simple one, and this was one of friend was jealous, tired of living her friend's shadow, then beat her up and became a villain and wanted to prove that she was better. And that's all this feud is like who's the better of the two, and one of them going too far to prove her point. So, but that wraps up SmackDown Live. Nice follow-up episode, some really cool segments, some cool creative segments, stuff set up in the future for Super Showdown. It's nice to have more matches that aren't Undertaker versus Triple H to look forward to, so that's nice. I'm excited to see where things go, particularly with Randy Orton's next victim, and seeing how the Becky and Charlotte feud develops. I think they've got, between that and the AJ Styles feud, SmackDown has 3 or now 4 really solid stories going with Rusev Day imploding. So sometimes that's all you need sometimes for a good wrestling show, is just to have a nice batch of interesting rivalries or storylines. And they all got some nice time here and had some nice development. Oh, what more can you ask for wrestling? So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening. I will see you next Tuesday for my review of Monday Night Raw. And if you want to follow me on Twitter and reach out to me and talk about wrestling and your thoughts on the show, you can find me at MarcusStewart7. That is the number 7. And until then, guys, see you next week.